Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Open Road Carnival Conference. Thank you so much for joining us here in the room, and welcome to our online participants. So hi, we can't see you, but hopefully you can see us. This is a pre-welcome welcome, so I'm not going to stay here for long and I won't do all of the introductions, but my name is Katie. I work for the new Carnival company. I am a white female, 5'9", blonde shoulder-length hair, and I'm looking to Sarah, who's just noticed I had it cut, so thank you, Sarah. And I'm wearing a long orange dress, which is quite colourful and patterned. For our online participants, just a little bit of housekeeping. Could you please keep the volume off? So please stay on mute. Hannah from the new Carnival company, she's going to wave at you now in the screen too. Hannah is managing the chat. So if you have any questions this morning, please do put them into the chat and Hannah will make us aware and we'll be able to share them in the room. I did say I wasn't going to do introductions, but I do want to thank our BSL interpreters that are here today. So for everyone in the room, we have Sarah and Julie, and they will be here to interpret our information. So thank you ever so much. I'm going to hand over to the chair of the day. We've got Deb Mullins. Here you go. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. Well, I've got my own microphone, actually.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Can I just, interject?
Yeah.
I should have said as well, fire. If there's a fire or if there's an alarm, it's not a test. The door is just at the end of the room here, and we have toilets which are just around the corner. And at home, please feel free to go to the toilet when you would like to. This is a very relaxed conference, so please feel free to walk around, to grab yourself a drink and make yourself comfortable. So thank you ever so much for joining us, and I promise to be quiet now.
Thank you. I'm actually going to hand over to Chris first of all. Chris from the new Carnival company that's going to put this into context about the Open Road project.
I sport my first line. My name is Chris from the new Carnival company, and I'm going to put this project into context. Thank you for all for coming today, both live and online. It's nice to see so many people at a conference event. We haven't seen this for over 2 years now, and it's interesting that the digital development is allowing us to present this in a different way as well, so that's really nice. Okay, the Open Road. The new Carnival company has been pioneering, if you like, accessible carnival for many years. And to further this ambition, we applied to the Arts Council England for a national activities grant entitled the Open Road. It had a number of stages, this Open Road project, and I'll quickly run through them. The first thing that we wanted to do was to create better understanding and appreciation of the social model of disability. We thought, as the new Carnival company, we thought we'd got it. We hadn't. We've learnt a lot in this process, and I think we can articulate it better now, but we constantly stumble over some terminology. We stumble over whether we got it right or wrong. We worry about it an awful lot, but actually the experience of working with so many brilliant partners has furthered knowledge and understanding that we have, and I think it's still a journey that we need to go on. So we wanted to relate the social model of disability to carnival practice, particularly practice on the road. So that piece of carnival that goes out onto the streets. We were excited. We had 4 action research projects that were going to go and test activity. We were going to find things out. We were going to present them. Then COVID came along. So we made Plan B and Plan C and Plan D. But we worked through it. We presented work in different ways that we'd anticipated, and those results will be shared with you today. So that action research was part of the process. Then we were going to present the results of this action research at the Association of Event Management Education. I always get that wrong. I might have got it wrong again. Educators, I'm not sure. Amy, when we say Amy, no, we say Amy. Harriet says Amy too, yeah. Conference in Brighton, live in 2020. Then it was going to be live in 2021. And then it was going to be digital in 2021. So we did present it. We had an audience of 180 academics from around the world, 11 different countries, and we presented work. not only the action research projects that were run by Callaloo, Art Shape, changed name halfway through, confused me, and Together 2012, and the New Carnival Company. We presented these, but we had other presenters like Alison, who came along from City Arts, presenting work as well. And we hope, we haven't assessed this yet, we hope we've influenced the way events are taught at university. That was the ambition, to change the way event managers think about putting events on. We shall see. That was part of the project. Then we had regional disseminations. So academic conference, academics, regional dissemination events, and this is one of those. That's making sure that our findings filter out to the smaller events around the country. So this is the first event of this kind. Harriet's presented a week ago. Yep, so Harriet's has a presentation. We're in Huddersfield on Saturday. We're in Nottingham later this month. So we are presenting this around the country. And the third, or the fourth, the fifth, I don't know, the final incarnation of this project is we're going to develop a resource hub. We saw Arts Council England are developing resource hubs. And we thought, if they can do it, we can do it. So all this work will be presented online. And this conference, elements of this conference, will be available after this event in the fullness of time for people to access. So we hope we are sharing the knowledge that we've collectively worked out together, and we can disseminate it and change the way Carnival is accessed by disabled people. So that's my bit about the open road. So what is this dissemination event we're doing today? What's on the agenda? I haven't a clue. But luckily, I'm going to introduce you to Deb Mullins here. Deb's going to say a bit about herself, so I'm not going to spoil her thunder, and tell you what's going on today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Chris. Yes, I'm going to stay seated. I don't need to stand up, do I? Oh, yes. Bit of feedback there. Thank you. So I'd like to welcome you all, those of you who are here, and these wonderful new hybrid events where we can have people join us from anywhere, including Brazil today. So we've got at least 2 people I know who are in Brazil who are going to join us today. And I suppose I should say a little bit of why I'm here. I'm the chair of an organisation called Outdoor Arts UK, which does have many members from various different art forms where people present that and create that work in the public realm, in outdoor spaces generally. And Carnival is very much part of that, and we have several Carnival members. We're an advocacy organisation, and we're also an advice-giving organisation. So do feel free to join. It's a very cheap membership fee. So that's my plug for Outdoor Arts UK. But I'm also here because I've been involved in the arts for at least 4 decades, and I've been involved in carnivals throughout that time, but particularly one in East London, in Newham, which sadly doesn't exist now, but for at least 10 years I was the director of Newham Carnival. We had about 2,500 people join us each year. And my main driver was to take that from being a schools-only project to something that represented all communities of that part of London. And for me, inclusion for everybody, whatever age, whatever culture they came from, was very important, and that we could break down barriers to participation, particularly for people, for disabled people. So we represented and had many disabled artists and disabled residents from Newham as part of that carnival. And that got bigger and bigger each year. And then in 2018, we were invited, I was artistic director of Emergency Exit Arts, and Frankie and Chris invited us to be part of the Unlimited programme, the Alegria project. And we worked with a group of dancers, disabled dancers and costume makers, and took part in the Unlimited programme. And you looking at me there, you probably remember that. And some of you came to Newham and joined us at the Newham Carnival and to the South Bank for the Unlimited Festival. And that was a glorious programme. So thank you for that, Chris and Frankie. I'm looking forward to learning a lot today and finding out all the things that you've been doing as part of Open Road. So I'm going to start by introducing our first speaker, which is Sarah. Sarah Pickthall, come on, you coming up to us here? Do? Yes. And she's going to talk about the social model remix. Sarah's from Cusp Incorporated. Would you like me to say a little bit about you? Oh, I will then. Well, listen to this. Sarah is an artist, a producer, a consultant, a trainer and executive coach working with artists and culture-making teams globally. And she is passionate about inclusion, culture making and social justice. And she works across arts and culture and film, health and personalised care, and throwing a light on the lived experience of deaf and disabled individuals and communities. Does that sum you up, Sarah?
I think it does.
Yes, great.
I think
well,
it does.
I'm looking forward to hearing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely brilliant to be here. So my name's Sarah Pickthall. I'm a middle-aged white woman with mousy hair. I was talking to Debs earlier that it's not very good at the back. It's a little bit of roadkill at the back, but you won't be seeing that. And I've got hedgehogs on my top, so I kind of like the metaphor of a hedgehog. It's small and bumbly, and it's got prickles. So, what am I doing here, speaking to you for about half an hour? So bear with, I hope it will be enjoyable. And I'm going to be looking out there to see if you understand what I'm saying and adapting as I go. So do say, if you don't understand what I'm saying, please do challenge me to say it in a different way. And I've got a slideshow, a PowerPoint, and I'm going to be explaining that as I go through. So I've called this the social model remix. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Now, you might think, old hat. What do we mean by old hat? Well, haven't we heard about the social model for many years now? Next slide, please. Yeah, so here's an old hat, Patrick McNee. Now, he's part of the Avengers. I see myself as a modern-day Purdy, but not as sort of athletic and go-to as she was. Next slide, please. This is me. So, I'm a disabled woman, and this is a picture of a projection of Sprung Digi, and this was a big project I did, which was giving access to digital for big communities of learning disabled people in Horsham. And I love digital because of the access it can give us. It's really exciting, particularly for the life we're living in now, but also it can be very wearing as well. So how life is for me is that I live with chronic pain. And so I'm very, very sensitive to the world around me. And next slide, please. So when we're talking about disability, and a lot of us are disabled here, and it might be that we have hidden disabilities, or it might be that we can see that we are disabled. So what do we actually mean when we talk about the social model of disability? Well, it's like looking through a lens in a different way. And it's saying, yeah, I'm disabled, but why am I disabled? Not because of what's wrong with me, because I have chronic pain, or I have to take medication, or I need this or that. It's more to do with how society is organised, the planning, the design, okay? So if, for example, a building is inaccessible, or a carnival route hasn't been thought through, so it's really difficult or long, or there isn't rest, or there isn't an option to do things differently, or if information isn't available in a way that I can understand, or that I get sensory overload, or have nowhere to rest. The disabling part is about what is done and how it's done. Yeah? So it's about focusing the lens on what's happening outside of ourselves as disabled people, and that being critical. And it's not about what's wrong with us, our impairments. And a lot of this came from a great friend of mine, Tony Heaton. So I'm using that to just share the focus, the lens we're going to look through. Next slide, please. Okay, that's me. I love Carnival. Well, froggy in my throat. Sorry, everybody. That's me enjoying Carnival. This was 2012. I know some familiar faces at the back, Marcus and Caroline, who were there at the time, Chris and Frankie. An incredible project
that came from the ideas and passions of learning disabled people and disabled people working together with a new Carnival company, and also Ambassadores de Alegria and Horsham District Council. And we made this incredible carnival event all about St. George, who was the patron saint of people who were left out. So the ideas for that were critical. It came from what mattered to people, really important. Now, it was a challenge. It was beautiful, but we had to think a lot about, were people feeling comfortable along the way? We had sign language as part of our procession. Do you remember? I've got lots of nodding people there. We created our own enredo. Is that hedu? Heredu, yes. Paul will be telling us off later when he joins us from Brazil with our pronunciation. So the song came from those people who were involved. And it was a really significant moment, actually, because of what it represented. And, you know, it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty lovely. And it felt like the start of let's go on this journey, which we did then do. Next slide, please. So I'm here. Why the remix bit? Well, I wanted to do something different with the social model. How are we going to get people to get really interested in the social model? Because, social model, yeah, I know that, the political bit. So it's a great mashup, a bootleg or a remix. Let's play a different sort of tune. Next slide, please. So if you want to do a mashup or create something new, you need to recombine ideas. You need to use new instruments. Think about different side tracks and settings. Look for the hidden things. So this is the journey of what I'm going to be doing today with you. Where are the hooks? The way we can hook people in to think differently through this lens, social model lens, to come to a new arrangement, a new complement of things, ways in which we can do things, remembering and rebuilding things together. Next slide, please. Okay, so I am disabled and I can't get up these stairs. That's one way of looking at it. Next slide, please. This is Mike Oliver, and in the 80s, he was a disabled man who really pioneered the term social model. And he said, let's shift this focus on society. What's wrong? What's stopping disabled, deaf people, neurodiverse people being the best that they can be, existing and being included in society? Next slide, please. And from that, in the 1980s, people started protesting. It's not that they hadn't before, but it felt like, yeah, this is really important. We have to let society know that we have a right to be here. We need to be included. We've got incredible resources from our lived experiences. We want access. We demand access. We have rights to be included. And this all came about around the time of equality rights, the Equality Act, all of these things. So people started to find a sense of pride and took to the streets. Next slide, please. So this idea of don't make plans without us, and particularly for people with learning disabilities in the 1980s, nothing about us without us. And that still stands. In order to create and focus through the lens of the social model, you have to work in collaboration. Not as a tick box, not as an afterthought, but right from the get-go. So people were finding a voice to say, nothing about us without us. Next slide, please. Took to the streets, finding a voice. And there's a really interesting hook, if we're looking for new hooks, new rhythms. Next slide, please. A show that's going to come very soon on the BBC. So a friend of mine, Barbara Lasicki and Alan Holdsworth, they're making a documentary about their lives. And it was absolutely critical to the disability arts movement, what they did, tying themselves to buses, demonstrating, all of those things. And I think this will raise the consciousness in society of that disability arts movement, which of course the social model is very much linked to. Next slide, please. So, sorry to give you that this time in the morning. Coronavirus. Where is the hook in this? It has been catastrophic for everybody, but even more so for disabled people. Next slide, please. This is it's called Wakker, it's what people talk about. It means that the life that we're living, and even beyond coronavirus, and what we're experiencing now in the world, what the dreadful things that are happening. It's volatile, it's uncertain, we don't know what the outcomes are, and it's really, really complex as well. And that means we're all, to a certain extent, experiencing it, and some people are more than others, but there's a sense of we are all in this together. And I think that's quite useful. That's a hook. There is a danger that as we return back to normal, that some of those things, that togetherness is lost. Yeah, we forget what we've just been through together, and we really mustn't in order to honour the social model. Next slide, please. Because lockdown was nothing new for disabled people. I mean, as a disabled person, I quite liked it in many ways. I was terrified, but it meant that I could rest, could lie on the sofa, I could wear my gym jams, I could deal with my pain, my fatigue. I didn't have to cross the world to deliver things. I quite liked it. I mean, I wouldn't have chosen it, but there were some useful things around being flexible and looking after yourself. But it's nothing new for disabled people to be denied things. But for the rest of society, hold on, I don't have choice anymore. I can't do the things I want to do. Hey, that's been disabled people's lives for, as long as I can remember. Next slide, please. And of course, we saw different communities within the disabled community, the deaf community, having no access to sign language interpretation. For those government, every day we were there, no sign language interpretation. And how hideous a thing that was to experience that, and how angry the deaf community were about that. Next slide. And do you remember Black Lives Matter? Yeah, and within that community, it was very, very important that Black people are not one group, as disabled people are not one group. And within that, we can see disabled Black Lives Matter. Next slide, please. And we found in terms of taking to the street for protests that a lot of Black disabled people couldn't take the same route because it wasn't accessible to them. So they had to have different protest routes, design their own. So that sense of being left out of something. So constantly being aware that we're not just one thing. There are different communities within the disabled community with different lived experiences, different blends of being and living and histories and all of those things. Next slide, please. And of course, there was a huge impact as well on particularly the siblings of young disabled people who were at home at lockdown. And so much of their parents and carers had to focus because we lost all that care, access to support. And so there have been studies about how it really impacted on family members as well. So what do we think then when we're thinking about how can we create and include and make our spaces relevant, not just for disabled people, but for those connected with them, like their siblings, families, all of those communities connected to those people. Next slide, please. So how can the social model help us move forward to do our best work in an inclusive way? Next slide. We have to focus on what's not great within the medical model of disability. Next slide, please. So, medical model, when you look at the medical lens, it's all about what's wrong with you. And if you're disabled in this room, you might have been, what's wrong with you? What is it that's the problem? You can't hear, that you need help, that you're reliant on the NHS, you need protecting, you can't think for yourself, you can't see, you can't get up steps. Very, very wearing. Okay, next slide, please. The social model of disability, next, please, is very different. It's all the things in society that disable us, right? So that we might have less access to job prospects, transport's really difficult, the environment doesn't welcome or hold us, isn't gentle enough. We feel isolated quite often. Yeah? Lifts and adjustments, all of these things. We learn differently, we put in segregated education, perhaps, yeah? And so being included is more difficult for us. Our experiences have been very different. And also access to communication streams. It doesn't come as a matter of course. We might have to fight for sign language interpretation, captions, those sorts of things. Disabling world. That's the problem. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, here is someone, you recognise this person, lots of nods, Rose. She was a hook. She's a definite hook, isn't she? Because she illustrated in a very open way the social model of disability. You know, I am super talented, just I need access to sign language interpretation, access to learning and developing my skill. I can shine. I can be better than everybody else. She is an illustrative example of the social model of disability. If you disable me by not providing sign language interpreters, then I can't thrive. I can't do my best for the world, in the world. And because of Rose, that impact on British Sign Language being seen as a recognised language, you know, she started it. It got everybody moved and involved in that movement. So what are the hooks that we can use? Where are the role models that we can build and develop to be our champions, to say, I have the right to be involved and included? Next slide, please. So the medical model asks people, oh, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And you might, as you're designing and developing, you go there because you've always gone there. What's wrong with you? What's the problem? How can we meet your need? But actually asking people, what stops you in your life? You know, what holds you back emotionally? Where do you feel fear? Where are you not so sure? Tell me about this. Tell me about that. It's about relationship. Not just going through a tick box, not deciding right at the end of, oh, we better check with disabled folk whether it's going to work for them. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an old picture. This is a hook. I'll tell you why I think this is a hook. So you can see here, there's a disabled woman, wheelchair user, and she's there on the platform. I'm saying I perceive her to be a female, but I'm not sure. There's a gap, and they can't get onto the train. But when I look at this now, after the life we've lived, I think, what about all those folk on the train? How are they feeling? We actually had a discussion yesterday about crowded trains and anxiety and hidden disability and all those things that over these last few years might have been exacerbated in us. We feel anxious. We don't know whether to wear masks or not, who's wearing. You know, we are all over the place with how we feel. It's really affected us. So when I look at this, I think, who are the people on the train and what they're feeling? Yeah, not just this one person. So from this slide, I think, let's think about everybody. Let's consider all of us and how we're feeling. Yeah, it's not just about a few of us. It's all of us going through and living this life and really coming up against barriers. Yeah, that society is not soft. It's made very quick decisions, particularly of late. Next slide, please. I hate to do this to you, but here are some of the symptoms of long COVID, because I'm saying, oh, it's not about medical. But actually, long COVID is a significant thing that has shifted, changed in our society. And all of these symptoms people are experiencing. I read just 2 days ago, there are 14 million people in the UK that have long-term health conditions. 14 million people. That's a massive amount of people, and they might not even recognise that they have those long-term health conditions. But therefore, shouldn't we be considering that everything that we do needs to have a sensitivity, to inquire, to build relationships, all of those things? Let's get rid of that slide. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, a little bit of diversity, equality or equity, inclusion. Now, Carnival is about all of these things, I feel. Certainly when I became involved in Carnival, it felt so important to be working globally with different perspectives, with the history and the dynamic of Carnival. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sensitive. For those at home, I'm drinking water because I've got a froggy in my throat. Thank you very much, Frankie. We know that diversity, all our lived experiences together, really is important, makes it stronger, makes it feistier, makes it more fun. Equality or equity? I'm going to come on to that. Inclusion, to feel included. I think I've done this before. Inclusion in sign language. I take my right hand and I go down past my left hand. It's deep. Yeah, it's deep. It's not, oh, come on, get involved. Inclusion, we have to think deeply. So if diversity is the mix, So we've all got different experiences in this room. Inclusion is making the mix work. So how can we be together and it work for everybody? And for me, I take that a bit further with a mashup. That means about curating the playlist together right from the start. So don't put your invites, come to Carnival, say, get into a group of a huddle together and find out about each other and understand what the right playlist is going to be. Yeah, right from the start. Next slide, please. So equality versus equity. I'm going to explain this. So, yes, please. Here are two pictures. The one on the left, that is equality. So they've all got the same apple box to stand on and they're all reaching up to grab the apple. But it's not fair. Some folk can't get those apples, right? Person on the right can't. On the right, it's equity. Yeah. So that means adapting. Oh no, hold on. They're the same picture. We have to cut. I'm really sorry about that. We can maybe do something about that in the edit. Okay. So if you imagine, there's always something, isn't there? Okay, I'm not going to be embarrassed. But the question, if that person on the right, Sarah, can I ask you, would that be okay? That person on the right, the smaller person, how could they reach the apple? Fantastic. Sarah, thank you very much. So Sarah suggested getting somebody to lift them up. Okay, so supporting and enabling that person to grab an apple. Or you could get some more apple boxes as well. That's what the picture should have looked like. Human error, I love it. Okay, next slide, please. Now this is interesting, isn't it? Because this is about Jo Wiley and her sister Frances. You might have remembered this in lockdown. She was appalled that she got the notification to go and have her vaccine before her sister, who has a learning disability, her name is Frances, got the call as well. And she was horrified what was going on in terms of people getting what they need. What didn't seem to be getting through was that, people with learning disabilities may have additional vulnerability, they might need more things, and they should be right at the top of the list. But because Jo, a star, got involved, it was a hook. So it allowed people to immediately change the law and get those people. So I've got to run up. Next slide, please. So access to vaccines. Carry on. So the sense of we are not vulnerable. We live in vulnerable situations. This is really important. Okay. So that sense of vulnerability doesn't mean that we're victims. Some of us are clinically vulnerable. Yes, please. Medical intervention, yeah. So we have physical barriers, but also it's attitudinal. And some of us depend on medication. We're not going to deny that. That just doesn't keep us going. But it's really important that that's not the only thing. Next slide, please. So the sense of in government, people weren't really understanding or thinking about vulnerability. It was all the vino, so the wine and the parties. They would, yes, please. So equity is treating people differently, dependent on need. And this is what we need to remember. So, not focusing on how someone's disability makes it harder to go far or often, but what is it about Carnival and the local environment in which it is made and moves makes it difficult for you to get to it, go with it, and stick with it? Next slide. So this is interesting. This is a call from Freya Papworth to say, let's not forget the things that we've learnt when we came together and we understood each other. Working from home is not a weakness. People will have more sympathy and understanding. We hope to retain that. Yeah. And working together and to be careful and have care as we build what our arts practices and Carnival will be like. And that might be digital as part of that, which we'll be hearing more about. Yes. So let's lift the restrictions. Next slide, please. Lift the restrictions that you are imposing. Yeah, that's really, so we know that all the restrictions have lifted, but what are you continuing to do that makes it that people cannot be involved, particularly disabled people, in what you're doing? Next slide. So we're here, we're coming out, be welcome, involve us. So we can be part of Carnival, taking part, being included, and making political Carnival about our lives. facilitating, supporting, empowering us, please do that. Modifying, varying, differentiating, adjusting, do all those things to make it comfortable and work for us. Don't have to simplify it, just do those things that makes it fit for purpose. Next slide. There we go, more of that. Next slide. So, from the story of ourselves to the story of us to the story of now. Okay, this is Marshall Gans, and he worked with Barack Obama. And this is about the story of now, the call to action. Yeah. So why are we here? How can we do together? How can we include everybody? So a few tips at the end, please. Next slide. Stop, step off, step aside, take small steps and celebrate the good things, your successes. It does take time to get this right. Different perspectives. Get people in the room who you didn't know you had to talk to. Change your circle of influence. Don't just talk amongst yourselves, talk to others. Get closer to new people, their supporters, and let people in. Make what you do inclusive and relevant. Yeah? Curate that Carnival playlist together from the start. Throw away your best laid plans. It hurts to do that, and start again. If it's not working, just do it. Just do it. Find allies, accomplices through difficulties, as well as supporting each other. Share your best practice, which is what today's all about. And wrestle when things go wrong, like I have just done with my slide, your embarrassment or shame. Move on. And that's it. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Articulate all of that so well as you did. Thank you. We're just going to put a little bit of time at the end of each person's presentation in case you have any questions, and also anybody who's online can send us something through the chat. So there's Sarah, you may want to come back in case anybody wants to ask you anything. I'm particularly minded from that quote that you gave. Now my computer's shut down, so I can't remember it. But it was that. But don't do anything without us.
Nothing about. Yeah,
that's the one.
Nothing
yes,
about us without us.
Yeah, I thought
that came from the 1981 white paper that put people with learning disabilities right at the centre of decision making.
Yeah,
and I just think it just rolls off the tongue really well, doesn't it? Now,
it does.
Still,
yeah,
so important.
Yeah, it's very easy to just sort of think you know everything, and
yeah.
I discovered that I really needed to ask and have proper conversations with people when I was trying to be more inclusive about what I was doing. So thank you for that. Does anybody